In this episode of Locked On Capitals, the Washington Capitals lose in the first round again. How are they going to change this so this doesn't happen again next year? What changes need to be made? A former Washington Capitals assistant coach gets his shot as a head coach. And then the road ahead with the Washington Capitals, should the injuries facing the Washington Capitals concern you? We'll talk about all of that and more next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all platforms, and I want to thank you for making this your first listen or view of the day. Yes, this podcast is also available in video form on YouTube, so check that out. My name is Dan Holme. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. Well, welcome into this show and welcome to the official off season. I know that there's a lot of Capitals podcasts out there that are kind of packing up their tent and heading out of town. Locked On Capitals will have you covered all year round. So all throughout the summer, we will have shows 5 days a week. In August, I think we'll have only 3 shows a week, but nonetheless, we will have shows for you year around covering your Washington Capitals. So the Washington Capitals face a first round exit again. We've heard this and we've dealt with this for so many years. What changes are going to need to be made? We'll talk about that in this show. It seems a bit frustrating that the Washington Capitals have not made it past the first round since 2018. And, kind of taking a look at this team, it is an aging roster. There are changes that are going to need to be made, most notably in net. It's a conversation that I've had, and most all beat writers for the Washington Capitals have had this entire season, is that Vitek Vanacek and Ilya Samsonov have not been enough. And who are they going to get to shore up that net minding position? There's a lot of free agents out there, but none of them I can say just from looking at them look like a real upgrade from what they have right now. I mean, one of the biggest names circulating out there is a free agent coming up here in the form of Braden Holtby. Braden Holtby, of course, you remember from 2018, who helped the Washington Capitals win the Stanley Cup. Him and Philip Grubauer. What do you fans think? Would you like to see Braden Holtby come back to the district and kind of right that ship in net? It just seems that ever since he's left, there's been inconsistency. I know that the 2 netminders this season were able to piecemeal together 100 wins or 100 points rather. So I mean, it's not a horrible tandem, but it just seems like, to me, it's an inconsistent tandem and something that needs to be addressed. So, I mean, that's what we're talking about. This past series here with the Florida Panthers kind of proved to a lot of different people, and, I think to the Washington Capitals and their fans, this aging roster, it needs an upgrade. It needs to be retooled, and I honestly think that this Washington Capitals team is facing a rebuild. And, it was just a matter of time. And in the post-game presser, when they were talking to Alex Ovechkin, he kind of broke down and almost seemed like he was going to break down into tears at some point when he was asked if he thought that this Washington Capitals team as is could make another push for the playoffs. And I mean, it's probably a bit hard for him. He's played with Nick Backstrom and John Carlson and TJ Oshie and the likes of that for quite a few years. So to kind of, have an honest assessment of oneself and look in the mirror and say, we're not as young as we used to be. If you take a look at Nick Backstrom and his hip injury, they're saying that he might need surgery, or he's even kind of toying with the idea, or he was asked about if he'll retire. We'll talk about that later in the show, but it's just that, it's kind of a sad thing in a certain way that this nucleus of players, kind of has been with together for quite some time, except for the net minding situation. I know that it's not the complete same lineup as the 28 Stanley Cup winners, but for a good chunk, even before the Stanley Cup, it was these players that were out on the ice: TJ Oshie and John Carlson and Alex Ovechkin, and the likes of that for quite a few years. So it's kind of a daunting thing and kind of a scary thing, I suppose, for a lot of those players to look in the mirror and say, hey, a lot of us might not come back next year. It almost seems certain that it was Justin Schultz last game with the Washington Capitals, as he's going to be a free agent and kind of the low guy on the totem pole as far as wanting to get re-signed. I mean, he doesn't have a lot of great value to this team. He didn't have a really spectacular season. And, if we're going to look to go younger, and let's face it, that's what this Washington Capitals team needs to do, as the NHL is getting younger and younger. This Washington Capitals team, as of now, is getting older and older, and is one of the oldest, if not the oldest team in the NHL. So, that's what they have to do. And it's going to be a lot of tough questions that need to be answered. I've heard John Carlson's name, and I was talking with Michael from Stars and Sticks yesterday, and that was his assessment, is that it might have been John Carlson's last game with the Washington Capitals. And, if you say that to a lot of people that are like, John Carlson, the all-star, one of the best defensemen in Washington Capitals history, yeah, well, I mean, there's going to need to be big changes that are made. It's not going to just be all the low-hanging fruit, so to speak, on the team. It's going to be some names that you have known to love for many years, and it's going to be hard to get used to looking at this Washington Capitals team without a lot of players that have been here for some time. But growth is what's needed to move this team forward. If you take a look at the Washington Nationals, they are facing that right now. And that's what all these teams that, when you go through a rebuild, that's what it's about. You look at the players and you assess the talent on the ice, and you look at it and you say, this isn't working. And if it's not working, then changes need to be made. You can't keep a group of players together merely just because they're friends and, it's nostalgic and it's what you want to see on the ice. You need to put a winning product out on the ice. And that's definitely not what this Washington Capitals team was. If just let's look at this series against the Florida Panthers most recently, and they just got outworked in almost every single way. And you kind of saw them look at each other and like, I don't know if we have enough fuel in the tank to take on this Florida team. The Florida Panthers came at them with a lot of offensive power and some great net minding and some, towards the end, some great defense there. And it just seems like no matter how hard the Washington Capitals pushed, it was not enough to get over that hill. And, let's face it, if they were able to, for some reason, get past the Florida Panthers, would they have made it past round number 2 if they were going to play the likes of the Tampa Bay Lightning? I just don't think that, everyone would say, well, Dan, they did it in 2018. This is not the 2018 Washington Capitals out on the ice. And I think that everyone kind of knows that. So that's what I'm talking about, is that there are going to be some major changes that are going to need to take place in this offseason. And I know it's going to be uncomfortable for a lot of Washington Capitals fans. All right, so after the break here, we're going to talk about some of the news of the day. I know that this season's over and this is a Washington Capitals podcast, but being that it is the offseason, I'm going to talk about a little bit of news around the NHL and just some coaches that are changing and some player updates. We'll talk about that next. Our partners at BetOnline continue to be the number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all of the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next year's NFL futures. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Thank you for making Locked On Capitals your first listen. For your next listen, check out Locked On Now podcasts, nightly recaps of every NHL game with analysis from our local experts. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, so in this next segment, we are going to talk about some news around the NHL. Just because it is the offseason and there's not a lot going on with the team right now. The biggest news of the day is that we do know that Barry Trotz was fired, and his replacement is a name that should come as no surprise: Lane Lambert. Yes, the assistant coach under Barry Trotz was the replacement for Barry Trotz. And haven't we seen this before? Maybe you remember Todd Reardon and that whole experiment and how that went. And I got to say, just kind of a surprising move from the New York Islanders. I thought that if anything, they were going to go, before Gabby, Bruce Boudreau signed with someone. I thought that, that they would try to go after him. And, to a certain extent, I think that maybe that's why the Vancouver Canucks, who seemed kind of undecided on Gabby, that they ended up re-signing him, because I think that they know, just based on how the free agency that looms and all the different coaching carousel, that they did not want to lose Bruce Boudreau. So I don't think there was a lot of options necessarily for the New York Islanders, but just a real surprising move. If you just take a look at it, that Barry Trotz has a pedigree and a proven track record of winning. To replace him with Lane Lambert, who has been an assistant coach for quite a few years, but is an unproven commodity. So to go from a proven winner to an unproven commodity seems to, be a bit questionable. I mean, like I was saying, if you take a look at the Washington Capitals, when they let Barry Trotz go, they went with Todd Reardon. And how did that go for them? Not too well. So it's just, there's got to be a whole lot more to that story, if you ask me, to go from, like I said, Barry Trotz, a proven winner, to Lane Lambert, who did a fine job as an assistant coach, but ultimately we do not know how well he will do as a head coach. Lane says he spoke to Barry last week, and Barry told him he hoped he would get the job. They spoke again today, and Barry said he was thrilled about the news. And, I don't know. I mean, I think that's Barry putting on a strong face. And I think, like I said in a previous podcast, that, the world is Barry Trotz's oyster, and that he could probably coach anywhere that he wants. So I think that ultimately Barry knows that, if that's how you're going to treat me, kind of this was the same treatment that the Washington Capitals gave him. Why? It's just so funny to me. Why does Barry Trotz get this cold shoulder from teams that he did such a good job with? I know that this, season didn't end for the Islanders the way that they wanted it to, but to turn on him for Lane Lambert, it just, it really makes me scratch my head and wonder what is going on there. And then in other news, the Golden Knights fired coach Pete DeBoer. I think that he would be a good fit on a lot of different teams as well. And just kind of the fickle nature of the NHL, that this was the first year that the Golden Knights didn't live up to expectation. They've only been in the league 5 years, mind you, that they're going to turn their back on Pete DeBoer. So who's next? It's like the circus, dun, 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 and it keeps going. One coach, gets recycled to the next coach, to the next coach, to the next coach. And anyway, who is going to end up stepping in and being the head coach of the Golden Knights? They haven't been in the league for very long, and they've already going through a bunch of different coaches here. It just doesn't make to seem a lot of sense. GM Kelly McCrimmon, head coach Pete DeBoer, and assistants Steve Spott and Ryan McGill have been relieved of their duties. Assistant coaches Ryan Craig and Misha Donskoy will remain on staff. Goalie coach Mike Rossetti will interview with the new staff when they are appointed. So just some kind of crazy news going on, and I expect to see quite a bit more coaches being changed in this offseason. Like I say, the coach is always the fall guy, so if anything ever goes wrong on a team, let's just blame the coach. Let's not blame the players or, God forbid, the GM, because let's face it, in most cases when the GM is changing his head coach, is he's trying to save his own butt. That's what he's trying to do. And he knows that if he doesn't make some kind of statement move like I fired him, that he fears that his butt's going to be on the line and he's going to be the one that gets fired. But, it's a tough role to be a head coach in the NHL, and really in most any professional sport. You can't get too attached to any position, because if you have one bad season, you're probably going to be out. But the good thing about the coaching carousel is that if you're a decent coach at all and worth your salt in any way, that you'll probably land on your feet and with another team. But, it always baffles me that they think that, they're just going to kind of throw something at the wall and see if it sticks. That's what I'm saying, especially about Lane Lambert. To get rid of Barry Trotz, a proven winner, take a look at his record with the Capitals, with the Islanders and the Predators. To replace him for Lane Lambert and, the Pete DeBoer thing, it's just so crazy to me. All right, after the break here, we're going to talk about the injuries facing the Washington Capitals and what's ahead for this team. I think that there's going to be a lot of changes, like I talked about in the top of the show. What are those changes going to be? We'll talk about that next. Imagine dipping your finger into that plastic tub of birthday cake frosting and then opening your eyes and realizing that it was only 150 calories and 16 grams of protein. That is what it's like to eat a birthday cake puff from Built. I just received my birthday cake puffs and I have never had anything like this before. They're available right now and we can't promise that they'll be here tomorrow. So go get them today at built.com. And if you haven't tried the puffs, I'll let you in on a little secret. Because that's what friends do. A chocolate covered marshmallow protein bar. Yeah, you heard me. Delicious flavored marshmallow covered in 100% chocolate. Make every day your birthday with Built's birthday cake puffs. Built has taken the delicious experience of biting into a fresh slice of birthday cake, enrobed in it in 100% white chocolate, and even added sprinkles. With 150 calories, 16 grams of protein, and only 9 grams of sugar, this limited time flavor is an amazing option. If you are looking for a healthy way to get flavor and variety in your day, all Built bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. That means that with Built, you can eat healthy and actually enjoy doing it. And they are made with collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of healthy benefits. Go to Built.com to get birthday cake puffs now. So go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. That's right, use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, so in this following segment, we are going to talk about some news around the Washington Capitals. And I know that the Capitals have been eliminated, but there are some other players out there that continue to play. Martin Fehervary will play with Slovakia, in the IIHF World Championship, and Michael Kempny will suit up for Chechnya. This year's tournament is in Finland. Caps, I'm pretty sure that that is going to be kind of good for those guys, that that the Capitals made a quick exit, that they'll get a chance to continue to play, and especially a guy like Michael Kempny, who did not get a lot of playing time during the regular season, kind of keep his skills up, because he is also a free agent and most likely will not be re-signing with the Capitals. I would be most surprised, as a matter of fact, if he did. But Martin Fehervary, I will say, most likely will return to the team next year. But good on him for representing his home country of Slovakia. And we wish both of them nothing but the best. So, just talking to some of the players and what their thoughts are about this Capitals team going forward, I'm pretty sure that there's going to be hard decisions, a hard summer for us, but it is what it is. I want to win. Alex Ovechkin reflects on his milestone year, battling a late injury and a long road ahead for the Capitals. And I think that probably hits him the hardest, because he is the captain of the team. And I think that to a certain extent, he probably feels a lot of pressure for this Washington Capitals team to perform. He is the captain, and he did lead the charge, especially in the physical game in this series. And I don't think that ultimately we could have not asked for anything more from Alex Ovechkin. He plays through injuries, and he did sustain an injury that it doesn't sound like will need a surgery. But, that I think that, he's kind of reflecting and kind of maybe realizing that his time with this nucleus of players might be coming to an end. And then a thing, too, about Tom Wilson, and everyone, every night when there was a playoff game, everyone was hoping that they would see Tom Wilson on the ice. And, is Tom Wilson going to be in tonight or the next game? As it turns out, GM Brian McClellan said Wilson would not have come back, even if the Capitals had won, and that he was facing, a surgery potentially. And it sounds like that he will not have to face that at all. Tom Wilson acknowledged that he suffered a significant knee injury in game one. He had started working his way back when the season ended. Isn't sure if he'll need surgery or not. And we're hoping for nothing but the best for Tom Wilson. He plays such a big role on this Capitals team. And, if you ask an outsider that doesn't necessarily follow the team, what do you think about Tom Wilson? They think a tough guy, or a guy that makes dirty hits, or a guy that likes to throw it on and fight a lot. Well, he does that on occasion, but he also is a great goal scorer, and I think is really kind of coming into his own. He's had a great mentor in the form of Alex Ovechkin, and I think that you saw a certain maturity in Tom Wilson this year, and I look forward to see what he brings to this Capitals team in the fall. McClellan on the summer ahead. We've lost in the first round in the last 4 years. We're going to explore changes. I don't think anything is off the table. mentioned scouring the trade market and spending in free agency where he expects to have some cap flexibility. And, you can expect that's probably some big names will move on and maybe that'll free up some cap space. But, like I say, at the end of the day, I think that his job is on the line too, because there were some glaring problems on this team that he didn't address, most notably in net. And, you got to kind of wonder what kind of patience Ted Leonsis and Dick Patrick and the brain trust of the Washington Capitals is going to have with McClellan. Because if you go into a season knowing that you have a deficiency in net and you do nothing to rectify it, who does that fall on? Does that fall on Peter Laviolette? No, he's the coach of the team. Does it fall on the goalies? No, they can only play the game. It falls on the guy that makes the decisions on who's on the ice, who gets signed, who gets traded. And in this case, it is Brian McClellan. So, if he doesn't shore up and make some changes, I ultimately think that his job is going to be on the line. And I talked to some beat writers here and they said, well, I don't think there were a lot of options, but that is not for us to decide. As an outsider or even guys that are beat writers that cover the team and are at all the press meetings, they don't know what goes on. I think that there are probably some pieces that could have moved that would have allowed them to pick up a goalie. You don't necessarily just have to look at free agents. There's the trade market out there. And, like I say, they're going to have to fix a lot of open holes on this team. Obviously, what they did this past year did not work. And if the Capitals want to, kind of maintain that legacy of always having a winning team and, filling seats, that's what they're going to have to do. You take a look at the Washington Nationals, for example, that are in a rebuild, and they are in the list of the worst attendance. The Minnesota Twins and Pittsburgh Pirates, etc., are also on that list. I don't think that Ted Leonsis and the other owners, Dick Patrick, etc., I don't think that they're going to have a stomach for having a half-full Capital One arena. So then the other major injury is with Nick Backstrom. And this one is kind of a tough one because he is toying around with the idea of retirement. He was asked about it and, he didn't say that he necessarily would, but I don't think that anything is off the table for Nick Backstrom. Nick Backstrom is not sure what the next course of action will be for his hip rehab surgery. Sounds like it's all on the table, but he's hopeful of getting closer to where he needs to be. That said, the hip is never going to be 100%. And, Nick Backstrom is on the wrong side of 30. And, he probably kind of has to question, where do I fit on this Capitals team? I think that, Nick Backstrom had a great year and was, had a lot of milestones along with Alex Ovechkin, but he's not getting any younger, just like none of us are. And it really remains to be seen what happens with him. Because with Nick Backstrom, that is Alex Ovechkin's right-hand man. He is the center. He is the one that dishes those saucer passes as he slap shots at home. Backstrom talking about the season, he said on blown leads. That's obviously part of things that you've got to do to be more successful. You have to shut these teams down. I don't know what else to say. It's obviously on us. It's disappointing. And, that was the hard part because I think that to a certain extent, you looked at Alex Ovechkin and he kind of had that will and he put on that strong face. But, it's tough because, this Washington Capitals team for many years, this group of players, this on the ice, they knew what to do to win a game. And then it seems like the Washington Capitals did whatever they could possible to win this series, and they were not able to do it. They got outworked in most every single way in that Florida Panthers series. And that was kind of just like the true litmus test for this team that, we did pick up some big wins throughout the season, but when the rubber hit the road, they were not able to answer that bell when they had to. And what I'm talking about here is the Florida Panthers in round one. So like I say, there's going to be a lot of questions that need to be answered. And then the other question mark is Carl Hagelin, who caught a stick blade in the left eye in early March, said he suffered a ruptured choroid. He had 2 procedures thus far and still faces a long road ahead. The Caps vet added that he won't get all of his vision back, but is hopeful that he can continue his career. And he is an optimistic guy, and he talked about that. And, I hope for nothing but the best for Hagelin. I'm not even just talking about his career with the Washington Capitals, but I am talking about him as a person. That it's not always all about hockey. It's about him as a person. How is he going to do? How is he going to maintain? He said that, for a few days after that, he had no vision in that eye. And how scary was that? Just a real fluke accident that he faced. at a Capitals practice. And, it makes me wonder, there were rules, if you look back a long ways, they didn't have to wear helmets. And then now they have to wear helmets. And then for a long time, they didn't have to wear visors. And now they at least have to wear visors. I wonder how far we are away from wearing the full frontal cage like they do in college. And it makes you wonder, why don't they do that right now? If you just take a look at all the accidents and injuries that have happened. You take a look at Carl in the injury that he faced, but a lot of broken noses, a lot of broken teeth. I don't know if it's aesthetically not pleasing, not to see the player's face and just look at this big fence on the front of their face. I'm not really sure what the answer is there, but you got to imagine that the National Hockey League is probably looking at, what are we going to do with these injuries? Take a look at him. He could have lost his vision forever, and at a practice note, nonetheless. So I think that some changes do need to be made as far as player safety is concerned. It has to be of utmost importance. You take a look at that, and I'm really pulling for Carl, and I hope that he's able to get his vision back, completely. I know he said it's not possible, but I sure hope that he can make that recovery that is needed. And then for this Washington Capitals to kind of to finish up this episode is that, Caps Nation, we are going to have to get used to the fact that, a lot of the faces that we've known and loved, some of them might not be here next year. And we're going to have to be okay with that, because what it's about is just looking for the future for this Washington Capitals team. And I hope nothing but the best. So that's what I'm saying. Just put a strong face on and knowing that whatever they do, it's going to be for the best. Now make your second listen Locked On NHL. From first round matchups to each Stanley Cup kiss, Locked On NHL covers the playoffs like no other. Hear the latest news and opinions from local experts every Monday through Friday. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast. Once again, thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals.